Welcome to the Under Construction Podcast with me, Martin Williams. Here we talk about how to build or rebuild your life one step at a time. Let's get to work. And thank you so much for tuning in to the Under Construction Podcast. My name is Martin Williams. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. You may do so on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and SoundCloud. All the links to the podcast can be found at guidedexpressions.com/podcast with an S. Today, my topic is everything is finished. So what does that mean, right? When I say everything is finished, right? What does that mean? Well, I'm going to explain. Anyone that's been listening to my podcast for any length of time, you know that I've referenced Neville Goddard a lot in my work. He is someone who's been very influential, in my growth as a person, as well as a business owner and everything that I'm doing in my life right now. A big influence is Neville Goddard's teachings. Now, for those who don't know who Neville Goddard is, he's a metaphysical teacher. He was active in the mid 20th century. Most of his work was done from 1950 to roughly 1970, right? And I believe he passed away in 1972. He had one daughter who I believe, and I might be mistaken, but I believe is continuing his work along with her husband in teaching people about Neville and about his teaching. So that's pretty cool, but I digress. One of the most important things that he said, and he said a lot of stuff, a lot of good stuff in his writings, was that all creation is finished. Okay. And, Goddard believed that all you had to do was assume the wish fulfilled, like whatever it is you wanted to have, do, or be, assume that it's true now, and everything will coalesce around that particular assumption, whatever it is. Now, when you hear that for the first time, that seems almost unreal, right? It seems like a dream, it seems like, some kind of a joke or something. And that's kind of how I saw it at first, and I was someone who had been reading personal development for a long time and someone who, was a Christian and, I believed in faith and I believed in, supernatural, intervention and things like that. These are things that I believed in. But, the longer you live and the more life you go through, if you don't really live that way, you really take on this belief that life is very hard, requires a lot of work. And, even after all that, maybe, you don't get what you want. Maybe success is not waiting for you at the end of all of that struggle and all of that hard work. You take on this belief that anything other than that is really just a pipe dream. It's not really true. So I was in that boat when I first heard that. But when you understand how it works, and basically what he said, what Neville said in all of his teachings was, just try it, test it for yourself. Like, don't take my word for it. And I would echo that to you. Don't take my word for it, test it for yourself. Because I know I've tested it, and I tell you, I've seen it work, and I've seen it work in ways that I never dreamed it would work, right? So I'll tell you a couple stories. I think that's probably the best way for me to show you how creation really is finished and everything is finished. And, it's not so much about working to get somewhere. It's about reorienting your mind and putting yourself in line with what it is that you want. And then just walking in that and understanding that, there are some things that I'm going to have to do. I'm going to have to do some things. It's not just about, meditating under a tree for 10 hours a day, right? But it's aligned work. It's, divine work in my view. And it's work where the toil and the struggle is taken away. So let's get to those stories. So in 2010, my now wife, she was my fiance at the time, we needed to move. She and I needed to move. She was pregnant with our daughter. And so, we were living in a very small apartment in South Philadelphia. And, it was an apartment that we were actually subletting from a friend of hers. And, we needed to save some money. I wanted to save some money. But, it was just a lot of things going on in South Philly. I love Philly. I love the city, but, in that part of Philly, it's a little rough, right? So, her car was broken into. The place we were living in was not the most comfortable. It was not the most, amenable situation, right? But, we needed to move nonetheless. And so, we got to the place where, okay, like, where do we want to live? What's the place that we want to go to? So she said, I really want to go to this place. It's called Glen Hardy Condominiums, right? Which is in the outskirts of Philadelphia, towards King of Prussia, right? So I said, okay, cool. So we looked at a place, and, the place was all right? It wasn't really like, oh, this is it. We looked at a place, and, we decided to put an application down for it, right? To rent. It wasn't to buy. And so, at the time, my credit wasn't good at all. It was really not in good shape. And so, when we talked to the realtor, the realtor, basically said, well, I'll see what I can do, but I won't make any promises, right? So he wasn't very hopeful, right? And he called maybe a day or two later, and he said, I'm probably not going to be able to get you in. And I said, well, did you submit the offer to the owner? And he didn't, right? And he was basically saying, I'm going to need, 3 months security, plus the first month's rent in order to even present this to the owner. So I barely had that. And this place was not cheap. I mean, this place was probably like, $1,100, $1,200 a month. And, I didn't have it, right? I barely had it, but I mean, I would have basically wiped out all the money I had. And, I talked to, my wife, and I said, I just don't feel good about it. Right. And, she was kind of disappointed. And so, I'm dealing with a disappointed woman, right? Who's also pregnant, right? No shade, right? But I'm just saying, things were not going very smoothly in the house at that time. Okay. All right. And, to be honest, I wanted to move too. So I said, all right, I got to figure something out. So, I started listening to Neville Goddard, and I wasn't really listening to him too tough, certainly not every day. Right. But, I was listening to him a little bit, and, I came across one of his lectures, and the lecture was The Law of the Identical Harvest. And he tells a story. I love the story. I never really get tired of hearing it, about a woman who was a follower of his, and she had married a man who was older than her, and she had never had kids, and he had children from prior relationships, but they had 2 children, right? The first child was killed in a car crash. Now, obviously I didn't love that part of it, right? It was a very tragic thing, but it was interesting that she kind of went into shock after the son died, and really was not herself. She really refused to be a part of the world. She just would not engage. And you can only imagine what that's like to lose a child, and to lose a child young. No parent wants to bury their child ever. And he was, I think, in his early 20s when he passed, right? So she went through this period of mourning, and then one day she woke up and she saw the sun, and according to her, the sun was as clear as, like if you held out your hand in front of your face, her son was that real to her. And that was the part that really moved me, because, she was going through this pain of losing a child. And then she was able to see this child just as a real, as like I said, your hand in front of your face. Like, that's how real it was to her. And everything, all the grief that she was going through broke at that moment, because she knew that he was okay. And, she heard him talking to her. This might seem a little far out for some people, right? I can understand if you feel that way, but it connected with me in a way that not many things had at that point. So, Neville goes on to tell the story that, they needed to move. This woman and the husband was a clothing designer, or had a clothing company or something like that. And they needed to move. And so they needed to move in New York City. And, there just wasn't any apartments to be had. Not only did he have to move an apartment, he had to move his warehouse with employees, right? So, he was facing a threat of having to possibly lay off his employees, completely disrupt his business, and add to the fact that they need to find a new apartment. So she told him, she told the husband, the woman, just tell me what you want, right? Doesn't matter what it is. I don't care. What do you want? So he said, I want an apartment just as nice as what we have now, with a view on, I think it was like 57th Street, between this street and that street. And, I want, as far as like the business part of it, like, I want a warehouse on this street, and I don't want to pay, any more than this amount, right? So he listed out everything. And what Neville said her gift was she was able to go into this state and bring it out as reality, right? So she went into that state where they had everything that they had put down on a piece of paper, and every single thing happened. Okay, every single thing happened. And it's interesting because now that I'm talking about this, I think the woman actually wrote a book. Her name is Louise. I don't remember the last name, but I'll have to put that in the notes when I upload this. But my point in all this is that when I heard this story, I said, oh, wow, that's really cool. I wonder if it'll work for me in this apartment, right? So that's what I did. I made directions from the apartment to my job at the time. And I figured out how long it would take to get from, that apartment to my job, right? And I figured that out. And I said, okay, it's only going to take about, I think it was like 20 minutes or something like that, right? And, I just, to the best of my ability, imagine us in that, not so much that apartment, but in that complex. And then I did that for a few nights, and then all of a sudden I had this urge to look again, right? So I looked again, and there was another apartment available. And I went to the realtor, and it was a very nice woman. Her name is Sheila Kareem. I think she's still selling houses in that area, right? And, I told her my situation. I didn't hold anything back. I said, look, my credit's not great, right? But I got a good rental history. I paid my rent on time. I wasn't paying much else at that time, but I was paying my rent on time, right? And I said, my fiance is expecting. It's like we really need a place, but and we really like this area. So she said, well, I'll see what I can do. And the difference between her and the other guy never presented her offer, which I think is illegal, but who cares at this point, right? She presented my offer to the owner, and the owner had me come to the apartment. We looked at it, and he accepted. And I put the deposit down and got the apartment that my wife wanted. And so my point in telling you that story, and I got one more story before I sign off, and I'm already at 16, going on 17 minutes. But my point in telling that story is that, no matter how impossible it seems, we have the power to shift reality in our direction. And, I didn't want to hurt anybody. I didn't want to, defraud anyone or anything like that. Because one thing that Neville talks about is using the golden rule. You don't want to cheat anyone, because, what you do to others comes back to you. The man needed to rent the apartment. As it turns out, he had just gotten remarried. He was very low on cash, and he moved in with his new wife in a new place. And, he was basically paying 2 mortgages. And so with us in the apartment, he's not paying the mortgage anymore. He's, basically, we're paying his mortgage basically. So, it helped him and it helped us. And that's really where I think the magic happens a lot of times. So, whether it was that or, my current job, I wanted to work from home. I wanted to make more money. I wanted to be able to, kind of put myself in a better situation. Because I was working at a job. I was working for a college, and there were some people who had work from home privileges, and I was not one of them. Okay. And it was never really defined when I would ever get that privilege. And so, I had resigned myself that I was going to stay there a long time. And, they finally laid me off, right? Budget cuts laid me off. And so, I worked in a couple of places that weren't really all that awesome, right? To be totally frank. And then I ended up at the current company that I'm at now. And I started out as a contractor, and then I eventually became a permanent employee of the company. And so, everything that I wanted, as far as working from home, higher salary, everything else, it happened at this company. But the way it happened was I put it on a vision board. And I talk about vision boarding a lot in the blueprint, which is coming soon. I talk a lot about visualization, and basically seeing yourself where you want to be. And a lot of Neville's teaching is all about visualization. It's all about, seeing yourself as the person you want to be now, right? So let's say that you want to be, let's say you want to be, a flight attendant, or, maybe you want to work in sports, or maybe you want to travel the world. The way you make that happen is you assume that you're doing it now. That's the power of our imagination. We have the power to put ourselves in places, even though we may not be physically there. We have the power to go there in our mind, right? And I'm telling you, every single thing that I've imagined to do has eventually happened, right? Some things took longer than others. But if I put my energy and put my attention on where I wanted to be, and I didn't even do everything that Neville had talked about, because there are times when I would just imagine it deeply, maybe a few days, and then I'd go on and do something else, and then all of a sudden, here it comes. And that's the power that we have, right? What he's saying is assume that you're there, right? So if let's say you want to lose 20 pounds, right? If you want to lose 20 pounds, okay, assume that it's already done, right? You've lost the 20 pounds. You're 20 pounds lighter than you are right now. What would that feel like? Would you feel dreadful? Would you feel excited? Like, what would that feel like? And basically you continue to focus on the feeling of it, right? For most people, it would be a sense of gratitude. You'd be happy because now you can fit into different clothes. Now you can, you feel confident wearing a bathing suit or whatever. Whatever your reasons are for losing weight, it doesn't really matter in this case. As long as you assume the feeling of being in that place now, right? And then persist in it. Don't just do it for a day or two, but do it until it manifests. Now, it doesn't mean that you're not going to have to alter eating or exercise, but the thing is, those things will come naturally and it won't feel like the toil and the struggle. I think a lot of people try to make it happen from the place of, I'm overweight, I've got to lose weight, I got to do something. And so that makes the working out harder, that makes the eating right harder, because you're doing it from a place of struggle instead of a place of flow. And I think that's really where Neville was going with a lot of his teaching, is doing things from a place of flow, right? If you want to write a book or do a course, it may be very difficult if you're not operating from the place of, yeah, this course is done. This book is done, right? This particular project is done, okay? And when you operate from that point, everything begins to flow, because you understand that all creation is completed. All creation is finished. The thing you want to do is already done. It's completed. It's done. It's not something that you're doing. It's done already, right? You're just bringing it in. You're bringing it in to the manifestation. You're bringing it, into reality. That's all you're doing, right? And the way you bring it into reality is you put your attention on it, and then you're just like ushering it in. It's kind of like birthing a baby, right? You're kind of like the doctor, right? And, you have the wife who's giving birth, and then you got the father, right? And, you are ushering that baby out of the mom's womb and into the world. That's kind of what you're doing, right? And you don't have to You don't have to pull it out. It's going to come out. It just has to, it comes out of its own accord. When a baby reaches a certain, age or size, and, the gestation period is over, then the baby comes out. And it's the same way with us. It's the same way with every dream that we have, right? We sow many seeds, but we're so impatient that oftentimes, we dig up that seed before it's had time to really grow. And so there's so much more I can say about this topic, but I'm going to have to put a stop here because I'm a little over my prescribed time, but please come back and I will talk more about this creative process and how you can, see it play out in your life. I'm going to do some scenarios for whatever it is that you want, whether it's a new job, a new career, a new business, maybe, you got some health challenges, maybe you want to connect with someone in a relationship capacity, whatever the case may be. I'll definitely come back and go over those different scenarios with using this process, and I can't wait to share it with you. Thank you so much for listening. My name is Martin Williams. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share, and I'll talk to you soon. Don't forget to subscribe to the Under Construction podcast on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and SoundCloud. For more information on Goddard Expressions courses and products, go to goddardexpressions.com/products.